Fireflies are such magical creatures, aren't they? They may throw themselves at a flame or suddenly grow old, but every night before that, they will shine brighter than the stars.
What? No, they're not. What are you talking about? Why do people think fireflies throw themselves at flames anyway? Well, let me just brought up the question, I guess. What exactly is firefly? Fireflies are insects in the familia Lampyridae, which came from the Greek word lampiris, basically means to shine. This family consists of over 2,000 species, by the way, so their forms and lifestyles can vary. They are classified in the ordo Coleoptera, which means they are technically beetle. They are quite widely distributed, but they don't like arid and cold places. So if you live in northern countries, or maybe in the desert, then you might not be able to see one. Their characteristics can really vary between species. But of course, they do have common characteristics. As with other beetles, they have solid leathery forewings, called the elytra. When folded, the elytra completely cover the transparent and membranous hindwing. They also undergo complete metamorphosis, which means their life stages typically consist of the egg, larva, pupa, and imago. Most of them lay their egg on land, and so their larvae live on land, usually even underground. Even so, some are aquatic as larvae, the most famous example being the Aquatica lei. Their lifespans and duration of each stage also varies a lot. Some might live as larvae for several weeks. Some might even hibernate for years. Larvae are mostly predators, usually eat small invertebrates like insect larvae, worms, or snails and slugs. The pupation usually occurs on tree barks or inside mud and soil chambers. Pupa stage usually only lasts for a week or two. After that, the imago emerges, which you might have already familiar with. But what you might not know is, some females don't look like an adult. By that I mean, some adult females looks more like their larva. In some groups, they might not even undergo pupation at all. These kinds of females are called larviform females, and many species exhibit this. If you are wondering how to tell the difference between a larviform adult female and a larva, you can look at their eyes. An adult larviform female will have compound eyes like the typical adult form. Okay, some fireflies might be confusing, but that's just the females. Surely the males are straightforward, right? Well, yeah, relatively that is, but still confusing. Remember when I said they are quite diverse, with various characteristics between species? Maybe I could remove the quite from that sentence. They vary a lot. So much that entomologists sometimes are unsure where to classify them. If you read several publications on them, even the recent ones, you would see that sometimes they are classified in the Incertacedes subfamily. That is not a real subfamily. That just means we don't really know where they belong. Their type subfamily is Lampyrinae. That means those are the main subfamily among the fireflies. And guess what? They are a waste bin taxon, meaning they basically put anything that don't belong in other groups into this subfamily. So if you want to group them based on morphological characters, it can be quite complicated. But still, if you are interested in their systematic, I would highly suggest at least reading this publication. If not, then hey, at least let me show you some cool fireflies, because why not? If you live in the Americas and you see flashing fireflies, what you see are most likely the Photurinae. If you live in the Old World, from Eurasia to Australia, what you see are most likely the Luciolinae. If you see fireflies in anime, the one that's called Hotaru, that's the type species for this subfamily. Grave of the Fireflies? More like Grave of the Luciolinae. And one more thing that I would like to show you. My personal favorite firefly. The genus Pterotus. the only genus from the Pterotine subfamily. They can only be found along the western coast of the US. Why do I like them? Because their antennae looks cool. That's about it, really. Oh, by the way, some adult fireflies are predators. Meanwhile, some feed on nectars, and some doesn't feed at all. So even their lifestyle varies. Okay, but still, fireflies are famous because they emit light. Surely at least that character is universal among them. Right? Well, guess what? The answer is still no. Some of them cannot even emit light. So let's move on to the next topic about their light emission. Fireflies emit light by bioluminescence. This process does not produce much heat, which is why it's categorized as a cold light. So fireflies are not fire at all. I'm sure most of you have already know how bioluminescence works since there are many other videos specifically talking about that. But just in case you haven't, I'm gonna explain it briefly. But first, I would like to clarify that, contrary to popular belief, we actually don't really know how the whole process works yet. We just know that it involves oxygen and happens in the light-producing organ in the last few segments of their abdomen. It happens when a compound known as luciferin reacts with oxygen with the help of the luciferase enzyme. We also know that this process needs energy in the form of ATP, and magnesium ions are involved some ways. By the way, that last few segments of the abdomen are translucent, which is why the light can be seen clearly. They might control the light emission by regulating how much oxygen they breathe at the specific time. But again, we are not 100% sure of this yet. The light emission are most of the time species specific. Some fireflies glow continuously, while others flash at specific rhythm. Different species might emit different color of light, which is why, as you might have already known, many fireflies use this light to communicate, mainly to search for a mating partner. Oh, and while most fireflies just emit their own light, some might synchronize their light with other individuals. Wait, I got a question. Yes? Does that mean in theory it's possible that 10 million fireflies can light up the world as I fell asleep? Well, in theory, yes. In practice, I wouldn't say so. 10 millions is just too much, you know? Got it. Thanks for the answer. No problem, dude. What is wrong with my friends today? Anyway, remember when I said not all fireflies emit lights at the end of the preview section? Yes, diurnal fireflies usually don't emit lights. Why? Because it won't be visible anyway. The sun is too bright. These fireflies use hormones to communicate and attract mate. While that is usually the case, some diurnal fireflies that live in dark areas do emit light, like the genus Lucidota. By the way, I was talking about adult fireflies. The larval stage actually still emit light, all of them. Well, at least as far as we know. When we think of it through an evolutionary perspective, by the principle of parsimony, we could deduce that the ability to emit light most likely evolved for the larvae. We are not 100% sure why, but it's most likely as a warning signal so they don't get eaten. The larvae have a defensive steroid called lucibufagins, which makes them taste really bad. The light emitted by them enhances this signal so predators remember that it's not worth eating them. After quite a while, some of them start evolving the signal so they could use it for communication in some adults. Some species use this ability in more creative way. For example, females of Photuris emit light that mimic the light emission pattern of Photinus. They do this to attract and eat them. Clever girl. Fireflies' populations are actually declining. A big part of that is caused by habitat degradation. Some part of that, which might or might not be obvious, is because of light pollution. Yes, our artificial lights are harmful for them. As with other nocturnal insects, they are attracted to our lights. No, it's not because they are obsessed with it and throw themselves to death. It's because it disoriented them. A recent research published in late January 2024 reveals that these nocturnal insects don't actually fly towards the light per se. They actually position themselves so that they fly in a specific angle relative to the light source. This is because they usually use the moonlight as some sort of navigational tool. Specific insects tend to fly at specific heights, and they use the moonlight to determine whether they are at the correct heights or not. This is still a theory though. Further research are still needed. But if it's true, then the same concept applies to the fireflies, as a lot of them actually maintain specific heights during mating ritual. So, why exactly are our lights so harmful for them? Because it outshines their light. Nocturnal fireflies need to emit lights to engage mating. When a bright light persists in their area, they tend to not emit light, and so they couldn't mate. That means their proliferation rate decreases, which reduces their population size if it continues. For years, fireflies' light had been a wonderful sight for us amidst the supposedly dark night. Years ago, when I was a child, I wouldn't even imagine that at some point I wouldn't be able to see them again. But as time goes by, it's actually quite noticeable how they become harder and harder to find. Nature is changing, and a lot of that are caused by us. What we always take for granted might one day completely disappear. So, whenever you see a firefly, remember that they too are trying their best to live. For now, let's just learn what is known. And that's all for now.